Good morning, everyone. We are hosting live from our Seattle office and excited to share the important trends facing philanthropy. Sarah Anderson, Director of Strategic Priorities at Campbell & Company, is excited to lead this session with you. We are joined by our esteemed panel, Stacey Guanella, Director of Philanthropic Engagement at the Greater Tacoma Community Foundation, Maria Colby Wolfe, Development and Communications Director at Northwest Immigrant Rights Project, and Amanda Walker, Vice President for Advancement at the Evergreen State College and Executive Director at the Evergreen State College Foundation. On behalf of everyone attending today's webinar, thank you for sharing your insights and experience with us. Before we begin today's presentation, I'd like to quickly review some logistics for those of you who may be new to Campbell & Company webinars. To ensure you have the best webinar experience possible, please follow these tips. Please close any webinars other than GoToWebinar that are running on your computer. Next, we recommend calling in with a telephone instead of using your computer speakers. This will improve your audio experience. Just a reminder that we will be playing a video during this webinar. The video audio will be playing through your computer speakers, not the telephone, so please make sure your computer is unmuted. Lastly, if you experience visual issues, please send a chat to Campbell & Company or contact GoToWebinar at the number on your screen. Today's webinar will last 60 minutes, and you'll earn 1 continuing education credit that is good with your participation with CFRE International. Within the next 24 hours, you will receive an email from GoToWebinar that includes information on how to download your certificate. We won't be sharing slides from today's presentation, but we will be sending a link to the recording in the follow-up email from GoToWebinar. We do welcome questions throughout the webinar, so please use the questions box in the GoToWebinar control panel that should be on the right side of your computer screen. We will also hold time at the end of the webinar for Q&A. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Sarah Anderson, Director of Strategic Priorities at Campbell & Company.
Great. Thank you so much, Emily. And as Emily said, I'm the Director of Strategic Priorities here in Campbell & Company's Northwest office in Seattle, and really pleased to be joined today by Stacey, Maria, and Amanda. We're really excited to really be in conversation around what the Giving USA data shows us this year. It's a complex story, and we're really eager to hear from our esteemed panelists about what they've seen and how that lines up with what the data shows. Campbell & Company is proud to be a member of the Giving Institute, which began conducting the Giving USA research in 1956. This is the longest running annual report on philanthropy in the United States. It's also the most comprehensive report on the philanthropic sector. It gives estimates for both sources of giving as well as the destinations of where those gifts are going. Giving USA is published by the Giving USA Foundation, and that's made possible by contributions from Giving Institute member firms, foundations, and other donors. And sales of the report also cover production and marketing costs for Giving USA. The report is researched and written by the Lilly Family School of Philanthropy at Indiana University. And with that, we're going to dive into the video that Emily mentioned that gives us a little bit of a highlight of what the data shows this year. As a reminder, that audio is going to be playing through your computer speakers, so make sure that you have your volume on.
A strong economy, an end-of-year stock market drop, the complexity of tax reform and public policy. 2018 had its highs and lows. How did philanthropy fare? Each year, the Indiana University Lilly Family School of Philanthropy conducts the research for Giving USA, which the Giving USA Foundation publishes. Giving USA reports on the sources and uses of charitable giving in the United States. Campbell & Company is proud to support these efforts as a Giving Institute member. According to the data, total charitable giving reached $427.71 billion in 2018. That's over $427 billion flowing to our communities and energizing our economy. What does it mean for the nonprofit sector now? Let's break it down. From 2017 to 2018, total giving increased 0.7% in current dollars. When we take inflation into account, total giving dropped by 1.7%. There have been some dips along the way, but giving has grown for the better part of 4 decades. People propel philanthropy, though giving by individuals continues to decline as a percentage of total giving. Giving through donor-advised funds and family foundations likely accounts for most or all of this change. In 2018, individuals made up 68% of total giving, while foundations accounted for 18%, bequests for 9%, and corporations for 5%. When you include bequests and family foundations with individuals, the share of philanthropy powered by people rises to 85.7%. Giving by source was mixed. Giving by foundations and corporations increased thanks in part to the robust economic environment. Giving by bequests posted no change, and giving by individuals declined slightly. After growth during the first 3 quarters of the year, the S&P 500 fell 13.97% in the fourth quarter, ending 2018 down 6.2%. This volatility could have played a role in individuals giving less, along with other factors such as tax law changes. When we look at giving by type of recipient organization, religion still accounts for the largest share at 29%, although this piece of the pie has been shrinking for several decades. Next came education, followed by human services and gifts to grant-making foundations, health, public society benefit, and arts, culture, and humanities. International affairs, environment, animals, gifts to individuals, and unallocated giving made up the smallest shares of total giving. After a strong 2017, recipient organizations saw uneven results from 2017 to 2018. Giving to international affairs and environment animals posted substantial growth, influenced by disaster giving and increased awareness around environmental issues. Giving to arts, culture, and humanities, health, and human services stayed relatively constant, while education, religion, public society benefit, and foundations experienced declines in giving. But if we zoom out, we see a different story. All sectors experienced positive 2-year growth from 2016 to 2018. Following such a robust 2017, many of these declines in 2018 could be a course correction. The economy has long been an important predictor of charitable giving, and this held true in 2018. Disposable personal income experienced healthy growth in 2018, and individual giving was 1.9% of disposable personal income. GDP grew substantially in 2018, with a 5.2% increase in current dollars compared to 4.2% growth in 2017. Total giving made up 2.1% of GDP, similar to previous years. 2018 was a complex year for charitable giving, with many countervailing forces playing a part. Strong economic growth likely had a positive impact, while the S&P 500's dramatic plunge in the fourth quarter of 2018 may have depressed giving during the critical end-of-year push. Tax reform and the complex policy environment, from trade to state and local tax deductions, contributed to uncertainty. While total giving increased slightly in current dollars, reports have pointed to the decline in broad-based giving. From 2000 to 2014, the share of Americans making charitable contributions decreased by nearly 11%, according to research by the Lilly Family School of Philanthropy. At the same time, the use of donor-advised funds continues to grow. According to the 2018 DAF report published by the National Philanthropic Trust, both contributions to and grants from donor-advised funds reached all-time highs in 2017. As we face rising income inequality and uncertainty around tax reform and public policy, where is philanthropy headed? The nonprofit sector must continue to make the case for its vital work and for the broad-based philanthropy that has traditionally supported it. Campbell & Company will be there each and every day, helping organizations advocate for charitable giving and move their missions forward. As nonprofit consultants, Campbell & Company tracks and intercepts trends that impact organizations across America. Check out our website at campbellcompany.com for more analysis of the Giving USA data. To buy Giving USA materials, visit givingusa.org and use the code CAMPBELL for 30% off.
I think the video points to a number of really interesting stories that are reflected in the Giving USA data. Some people are talking about this as a year where giving is slightly up, and that's true if you think about that in nominal terms. Other folks are saying that giving is slightly down, which is true when you adjust for inflation. So there's a lot of complexity to the data this year that we're interested to dig into and hear a little bit more about with our panelists. There's a number of factors at play, and the video spoke to a couple of those that lead to a really complex story here this year. The first factor that many point to is the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, which essentially doubled the standard deduction and led to fewer people itemizing on their tax returns. We know that taxes and tax benefits are not the main reason that people give to charity, but it does impact, for many people, when they might make a gift or how they might make that gift. So there certainly could be some implications there that really had an impact on giving. Here in the Northwest in particular, we're a relatively low tax state in Washington, and so the fact that there were caps on state and local taxes that were included within that policy may have insulated us a little bit from that compared to other states. So that's an interesting aspect as you think about the Washington story that we're looking at. We also saw fairly healthy economic growth throughout the year, and then in the fourth quarter, with the stock market really being down, that had a big impact for many of the people that we heard from around their year-end giving. We all know that that December giving in particular is really crucial in the nonprofit sector, and having the stock market be down then, when we know that giving really often trends with the stock market, produced a particularly difficult kind of final quarter for many nonprofits. We're also continuing to see changes in how donors give, including increased use of giving vehicles like donor-advised funds, and that's something we're really interested to dig into with our panel today and talk about some of these trends. So without further ado, I'd like to invite our panelists to introduce themselves and say a little bit more about their organizations and anything else they'd like to add about their backgrounds. Stacey, we'll start with you.
Thanks. My name is Stacey Guanella. I am currently the Director of Philanthropic Engagement for the Greater Tacoma Community Foundation. My role with the Community Foundation is relatively new. Prior to that, I have 2 decades of experience working with nonprofits, most recently spearheading capital campaigns with the Annie Wright Schools in Tacoma, Washington, and Tacoma Arts Live. Specific to my role at the Greater Tacoma Community Foundation, we really focus on building a thriving Pierce County, and we do that by providing philanthropic support for the community's needs. My role specifically is I get to work with nonprofits to help them realize their philanthropic goals, and I also get to work with our fund holders, the individuals who have created donor-advised funds and other funds at the foundation, and I work with them to figure out their philanthropic strategy and then to deploy those funds back into the community.
Maria, how about you?
Yeah, hello, Maria Colby Wolfe. I'm the Director of Development and Communications at Northwest Immigrant Rights Project. NIRP is how we pronounce that. The W is silent. We're a statewide organization defending and advancing the rights of immigrants throughout the Pacific Northwest, primarily here in Washington State. We do direct representation, we do community education, and we do impact litigation and advocacy in support of our mission. I have been there just over a year now. Previous to that, I've spent about 15, 16 years in development in both small, medium, and large-size organizations, everything from Path with Art, which was small, to Swedish Medical Center Foundation and the Seattle Symphony. So there's a wide range of sizes, mostly in the arts. Happy to be here with all of you today.
Thanks, Maria. And Amanda, tell us about yourself and your role.
Great, thank you. And good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for this opportunity to be part of this conversation. It's a joy to be here with both of you. So I'm the Vice President for Advancement at the Evergreen State College, as well as the Director of our foundation there. And I'll say a few words about Evergreen, the college in Olympia that many of you may have heard about, but perhaps don't really know. Evergreen is a place where creative minds really layer disciplines into individual expressions of scholarship, and I have to say that our students and our graduates are truly my inspiration in doing this work to encourage philanthropy, because they're dedicated to making the world more just, equitable, and sustainable. They are, in practice, problem solvers that integrate solutions in order to tackle some of the most challenging intractable problems that we face in our world today. That's what they're passionate about. So it's easy to be the Vice President for Advancement there. And I joined the college in 2010 and took over responsibility for leading our foundation in 2014, and then joined the senior leadership team in 2015. And prior to that, I was in nonprofit arts management and fundraising, so that's something that we have discovered we all have in common. So thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you. So we've heard the headlines, giving topped $427 billion in 2018, and a lot of complexity, as we've talked about already, leading into those numbers, including tax law changes, policy changes, and economic growth, and a little bit of a downturn toward the end of the year. So what that amounted to was some uneven results across sectors and giving sources. And so we'd kind of like to hear a little bit from each of our panelists about how that showed up within their organizations, and what are your top line takeaways and the trends that you're seeing, how they compare to what you saw within your organizations. So Stacey, we'll start with you. Giving USA shows that giving to foundations decreased nearly 7%, while giving by foundations increased 7.3%. So decrease on one side and increase on the other. What are you seeing at the Greater Tacoma Community Foundation and throughout the kind of community foundation world?
Of course. So what I'm seeing, what my colleagues at the Greater Tacoma Community Foundation are seeing, is that giving goes up and down year over year, and the one constant is relationships. It's building strong, deep relationships with folks that hold throughout those ups and throughout those downs. Specifically, yes, the economy was strong, our policy environment was unpredictable, and tax law, quite frankly, was untested in 2018. And as a result, I think people gave differently. Specifically, I think high net worth individuals and ultra high net worth individuals typically give through foundations and donor advised funds. And for them, that can be a game time decision. It can often be a year-end decision. And specifically, when we look at December 2018, it was really volatile, and it was a little bit scary for some. So they may have held off on that giving. And I think if we look historically, we're going to see that in 2017, they maybe gave a little bit more. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in 2019, specifically in the final quarter of this calendar year. Beyond that, I would just say that I think for folks, their biggest challenge is, I think we know from the U.S. Trust study that the biggest challenge is finding out who to give to and how to give. And so I would just encourage everyone to continue to focus on building those relationships in good times and bad, when the money is coming in, before, during, and after any gift.
Excellent. Thanks, Stacey. Next, let's get a perspective on immigrant rights. Maria, can you share some top-line takeaways for yourself and your organization, what you've seen at NERP?
Sure. So I thought it was interesting that foundation giving was something that we saw an increase in, because we saw that at NERP, and that foundation giving, of course, is still individuals, right? So it's still people who are giving, but that foundation giving, I think, really spoke to me as a sign that many donors are becoming more sophisticated in the way they want to give and the impact they want to have when they give. And we certainly saw that our donors were interested in making an impact and making a difference in the world, and they were giving through their foundations specifically so they could make more of one. And I think that's an important aspect to the relationship building, right, that we do, is that not only do you have to prove that you are making an impact, you have to show your donors that you're doing that too. So you can think it all you want, but you need to go out and tell people. And we had a lot of our efforts this year have been about telling the folks who gave last year what they did with their dollars and what we did with their dollars. And they've responded with a great deal of gratitude to us for letting them know what it was that we were doing to make an impact in the world. So I think it's crucial, especially since the other thing that we saw was the crisis giving, that sort of political. You saw that when they talked about the environment and how people were giving more to that because they were seeing the impact. Certainly in immigration rights, we've seen people respond with a great deal, especially in our community, a great deal of heart, a great deal of warmth. And that response, however, is also driven by this idea of it's a crisis, which it is. It's a crisis, and what do we do about it? And we want to do something now, and what can we do? We're going to give to make an impact in that thing that we're seeing in the political environment. So it's been a very interesting year and a half at Northwest Immigrant Rights Project, certainly.
To say the least, right?
At the very, very least.
I'm hearing relationships coming up in both of your comments already. I think that's a theme that, spoiler alert for our viewers, is probably going to continue throughout the discussion today. Amanda, in education, we saw that giving in 2018 was actually down a little bit, 1.3%. What are you seeing at Evergreen State College?
Well, I'm happy to respond to that, and you mentioned earlier that this is complicated, right? The results are complicated, so I'll see if I can complicate it a little bit more as well too. So, first of all, one way that we typically count in higher education is based on an academic fiscal year, and some of the larger scale national studies that happen, like the Voluntary Supportive Education Survey, happens on a slightly different time frame, and so we're actually just this week finishing up our fiscal year, and we're anticipating a 20% increase over what we saw last year. So thankfully, we're not contributing to this slight decline. I will refer back to the video and say that we did see over the 2-year period a pretty significant increase in education, and in that, the last VSC survey, that found about a 7.2% increase over the previous period, and so, but that's just for higher education. So I think we need to watch some of the other research that will come out in the fullness of time to really understand what might be going on. But yes, that soft fourth quarter that we referred to, I'm sure had an impact. And even though our results were really strong this year, I think we need to be aware of that. But there are the unique circumstances in our organizations that I guess I want to surface a little bit. So in higher ed, many of the public organizations, the public institutions are sort of catching up, right? So perhaps they haven't invested in nurturing relationships with donors for a long time, like some of the larger Research One institutions or the private liberal arts colleges. And so there are many institutions, not unlike our own, where we're really starting now to lean into investing in this work and really try to make up for some of that lost time. And so we should be a little bit cautious about looking at the big picture compared to what might be happening on the local level and drawing too many conclusions. The other thing is mega gifts, right? So we read about these mega gifts, particularly in higher education fundraising, because they can be the basis for the large-scale comprehensive campaigns, and they aren't necessarily replicable on a year-to-year basis, of course, as much as we might like them to be. Knowing laughter around the table here. So I do wonder how that may be influencing what's happening on a year-to-year basis here. So, and of course, there are other key metrics we need to pay attention to. So we saw in the long range, smaller percentage of households giving. And so, what are we doing to retain and nurture donors at all levels? And how is that helping us build the pipeline for the future? So I guess those are a few reflections that I have to share based on that data point around education.
Excellent, thank you. Great reflections, and I think this really is a time every year when we do get a chance to step back and take a look at what the data is showing us, not only for a given year, but what story is that telling over a longer period of time. And a lot of that really does speak to our donor engagement strategy and thinking about what is that relationship building that we're doing that hopefully leads to strengthen our fundraising programs. One thing that we're seeing on the individual giving basis, you just mentioned it, Amanda, is the outsized impact of those mega gifts. And here in the Northwest, right here in Seattle, we saw the largest gift last year with Jeff and Mackenzie Bezos giving $2 billion to their Day One fund. But on the other end, we're really thinking about how are we broadening the concept and the idea of philanthropy? How are we engaging a more diverse donor base in our work? And that looks a little different for every organization. For some, it might be about really authentic engagement of women as donors, about engagement of donors of color. For others, it's about a multi-generational approach to philanthropy. There's a lot of different ways that can come into our work within our organizations, and I'm really interested to hear from each of you about how that's showing up. Maria, let's start with you.
Sure. Well, diversifying, for lack of a better term, diversifying the donor base is something that NERP is intensely passionate about. For us, it's not just a matter of wanting to increase that percent of households that are giving, which I think is part of and parcel of that conversation about diversifying the donor base, but about reflecting the community that we serve and reflecting the community that we live within. And so making sure that the people who support us and that govern us are also the same people who are impacted by our work and who are part and parcel of the community around us is vital to our being and who our mission is and what our vision is. And we believe in that really, really passionately within NERP. And frankly, I also believe, just as a development professional, you need to be going out there and asking, there's a lot of perceptions about people not having the funds to give people of color or women not having access to the kind of money that we look for when we're looking for major donors and that sort of thing. And it's just false. It's absolutely not true. And the reason that a lot of folks aren't giving who are from communities of color or are women or from areas where we haven't asked is because we haven't asked. And so it's really crucial to go out there and broaden your own biases about who can give and why people give. It's something we believe in also in part by our board and governance. So I think that diversifying your donor base isn't just going out there and finding donors, it's also going out there finding leadership, it's going out there and finding staffing. And so our board right now it's one of the most diverse boards I've ever worked with. It's predominantly immigrant folks, some of whom were clients of ours previously, and that should give you an indication. We have clients who now are running 100-person businesses. This is an indication that just because you start from one place doesn't mean that's where you end up. And that diversification on top part of the board has made me start to think about ways in which we have to do philanthropy differently. You know, we have a very big perception about who's on the board and who should sit on a board, and maybe there's a way in which we need to be thinking about giving circles, about other ways that people can give, about connecting with the ways in which these communities are already giving, because they are. They're just not giving to you. So how is it that they're giving, and how can we reflect the way in which those cultures are giving that maybe aren't reflected in traditional philanthropic ways of doing business. So it's been exciting for me to work in an organization where that diversification of donor base is one that is deeply felt and supported throughout the organization and by our leadership. So we got to do it. It's the way of the future, right?
Yeah, great, thank you. Amanda, what are you seeing at Evergreen State College?
Yeah, I really appreciate what you're saying. I think I want to pull a couple threads out of it as well, too. So, and thank you for your passion about this. So, I'll offer a few ways we're thinking about it and approaches that we're using. But also, like, we don't have all the solutions, right? Like, this needs to be, think about this as dialogue and ongoing, and not a box you're going to check one day and everything will be solved, right? So this is a journey for all of our organizations. So, we are very committed at Evergreen to serving a diverse student population. Many of you may know that we've been criticized for that, and in the wake of that public attention a couple of years ago, we really took that opportunity to lean into talking with our donors about what was happening on our campus, the choices we made, and the needs of our students today, right? Because when you think about someone who graduated from the college maybe 40 years ago, and the students who are coming to us through the door with different life experiences and different identities and so on, there needs to be that education, and that awareness raising and that understanding is a foundation that we can lay, right, through our work with our donors. One thing that I heard in your comments was thinking about doing this work throughout the organization, right? And I think that's really critical, because seeking to integrate equity and inclusion into our work in philanthropy will not work if it's ad hoc, right? It will only work and be successful if we're taking a systems thinking approach. And so we've done things like integrated goals and notes related to diversity, equity, and inclusion into all of our programs, and ask, how is this program advancing the college's larger commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion? And if we can't answer that, we need to go back to the drawing board and determine how that is. And then also, we have a vice president for inclusive excellence and student success who's very strongly brought the concept of belonging to the center of our work. And this is, again, a question we need to ask and work on through all the parts of our organization. So if you have board members who identify as people of color, or women, or LGBTQ, or other identities, who might not feel a sense of belonging when they're participating in your board, what do you do about that? Are you seeing microaggressions or worse? How can you build that sense of belonging for your board, for your staff? What about your alumni and your donors when they attend events? And they walk through the door, do they feel a sense of belonging in a way that allows them to really fully engage in their philanthropy? So those are some of the ways we're working on this, and I'm hopeful for our future.
Stacey, what are you seeing at the foundation?
So I'm going to carry on that idea of belonging a little bit and speak to that. So one of the questions that we ask at the Greater Tacoma Community Foundation day in and day out is who are the individuals and nonprofits that have historically not been at the table, who have historically not been involved in decisions that are made that impact our community, given that they are an incredible part of our community. As a result, we're looking at two different initiatives that we're kind of thinking through at this point. One specifically is the opening of a family philanthropy center, and that's to focus on that multi-generational giving, but more importantly, it's focusing on the incredible resources that wealth advisors provide to their clients, but providing it to our entire community, to anyone who defines themselves as a family in our community, bringing them together, whether that means a grandparent and their grandkids, whether that means a husband and wife thinking about the legacy they want to leave in the world, but really just taking down the barriers and providing those services to think about what change do I want to see in the world and what organizations in my community are making that change. So we're really excited to be working in that space. And then the second initiative we're looking at is widening or introducing Leave 10, which is a nonprofit here in Seattle, and bringing it down to Pierce County, to the Tacoma community. And again, this is that sense of belonging and figuring out how do we roll out Leave 10 in our community in a way. So first of all, Leave 10 is the idea that everyone can leave 10% of their estate to their community, to a nonprofit in their community. And as we roll this out, we're really trying to be thoughtful about the words that we're using and how they create barriers. Words like estate. A lot of people don't think of themselves in terms of having an estate. Yet, if you dig into the Giving USA numbers, it's pretty incredible. Over $10 billion of the dollars that were left in bequests were left by folks with estates smaller than $1 million. Those dollars add up. So how do we talk to folks about what they want to leave, what legacy they want to leave, and how do we make sure they feel a sense of belonging in that choice to be part of their community into perpetuity? So we're really excited about those initiatives.
Great. Thank you all. So across the country, we're seeing that the ways that donors give continue to evolve. Some of that includes the burgeoning use of digital engagement platforms for donors, especially in a booming and growing tech city like Seattle, in the Seattle region. And then rising incomes also are really leading to more and more donors thinking about giving vehicles like donor advised funds, and we heard a bit about that in the video and certainly see that reflected a lot in the data. So I'm interested in hearing from each of you a little bit about how the ways that you're seeing donors engage and give continues to change. And Stacey, let's stick with you for this, the start of this one.
Sure. So having the opportunity to work with the Community Foundation, we of course are working directly with families that are opening donor advised funds. We are not seeing the same growth that the commercial donor advised funds are seeing. We're seeing relatively moderate growth, but what we're excited about, what we're seeing is these are individuals and families that are coming to us ready to create a strategy. And it is our great honor to work with these folks to figure out, again, the change they want to see in the world and who's doing that in our community. So I would just encourage anyone who has a donor who is giving through a donor advised fund, as soon as they raise their hand and say that they have that giving vehicle, pay attention to that. That means they're being thoughtful, they're being strategic, and they've chosen you. So you're ahead of the game on that one. So back to the theme of relationships, building and honoring those relationships before, during, and after a gift is made. I think that's what we're seeing within donor advised funds. I would say we're also seeing an increased interest in impact investing, and those words are pretty specific, increased interest. So people are still trying to figure it out. What does it mean? What does it look like? We have a really exciting opportunity in Pierce County to work with some donors who are experiencing some capital gains situations, and then some community partners that are in our opportunity zones, and really matching those donors and those opportunities in place-based giving. So that's something, again, we're just beginning to explore, working with donors. I think there's a lot of opportunity. I also think it's really important to look to some other data points, one of which is the 2018 U.S. Trust Survey, and specifically that 68% of donors do impact investing in addition to their giving to nonprofits. So it's not something we need to be afraid of as an industry. It's something we need to embrace as an opportunity to learn a bit more about our donors and our fund holders and what motivates them, what they're excited about in the world.
Great advice. Maria, how about you?
Yeah, well, we've certainly we've certainly seen an increase in donor-advised fund giving. I don't think anybody's not seen that. And I actually really enjoy working with donor-advised fund donors when you get to them, because they do have a strategy. They have a purpose. They have an idea of what they want to do with their dollars and the impact they want to make. And that sort of thoughtful giving is really exciting to me, to work with donors who have that sort of thinking behind their giving. The thing that Northwest Immigrant Rights Project has seen a lot of is actually the social media and Facebook giving. And we actually did a whole campaign around that last summer. So last summer, the family separation crisis, as you might have, the ongoing family separation crisis sort of exploded onto the national scene. And here in the Pacific Northwest, we had some of the parents who've been separated from their children here in our local prison system. And we were given this opportunity from these folks who wanted to do a bond fund and raise bonds for these parents who had been separated. And we do not do bond funding. That's not what we do at Northwest Immigrant Rights Project, but it was an opportunity. And I think this is one of the things that with Facebook, with social media, you have to be ready to move and move fast when you see something open, and make decisions that may seem crazy at the time. And so we moved, and we made this decision, and we partnered with an organization called Resource Media. It's great, by the way. And they helped us design a very on-the-fly Facebook campaign. We did all of this work just on Facebook and through social media, driving dollars through either people doing their own Facebook fundraising, our own Facebook fundraiser, and then just giving through our website. And we raised about $200,000 in a matter of weeks. Mm-hmm. And part of that, of course, was because of the political climate, but being able to take advantage of it when it popped up, I think is really crucial. That said, we've done a lot of other Facebook fundraisers now. We sort of saw that and have started to use it in other places to encourage people to give through this vehicle, and people are really comfortable doing it. They trust Facebook, be that as it, whether that's wise or not, they do, and they will give through it. And it sort of sparks that first conversation that you can start having with those donors. And first conversations are how you get to second conversations. So we've been very interested in this, and we're exploring it more deeply. We've had a lot of success over the last year and a half with social media giving. And so we'll see how it goes. It's a whole new world.
And Amanda, what are you seeing in the ways that donors are changing how they give?
Yeah, so I'll add a couple of things. I really appreciate what you both shared, and I'll start by underscoring, if a donor has a donor-advised fund, then have the conversation, right? I'm thrilled when I hear that, because then it means they have a plan and they're thinking intentionally about their philanthropy. So, and we've seen increases in giving through donor-advised funds. I can think of a case, for instance, where someone had been thinking about this over a number of years and finally got to that point in their career, in their family situation where now was the time. They've set it up, and now their giving has sort of come to a new place. So we were in the relationship, and then the moment was the right moment, and we were able to be there, right? So a lot of what you were sharing, I think, resonates with us. I think we're also doing more to build relationships in terms of the kind of the inputs in the whole operation of having staff or having a more robust major gifts program. So I don't want to say it's absolutely more donors with donor-advised funds. There's other things as well, too. And in terms of social media, it's really inspiring to hear your story. Higher ed works at a maybe slightly different pace, right? But I think for us, we have, as a college, a much more robust digital media strategy coming out of our college relations program, and that's in part to encourage enrollment. But it's also, we have so many alumni and supporters who are tuned into us through Instagram, and Facebook, and Twitter. So just having alumni stories out there and having the profile of the college be alive and living in the digital realm is helping people be connected to what's happening at the college. So that's helping. But we haven't quite taken that next step to really have a robust digital media strategy. But I would say, again, think about that trend of how many households over time and how our lives are increasingly happening online. It's critical for all of us to be taking those steps to move forward. So.
Absolutely. Great perspective. I've got one more question for the panel, and then we're going to open it up for any questions from the audience. So if you have something that you'd like to hear from the panel about, please use the chat box to submit those questions, and we'll get to those in a few minutes. I want to return to a theme that Maria just brought into the conversation around the socio-political climate and what NERP saw in the wake of family separation. We've really seen over the last couple of years this concept of rage giving emerge, given everything that's been going on in the socio-political climate. And I'm interested to think about and hear from all of you what you're hearing from your donors and what you're seeing within your organizations where it's relevant around that. How is that showing up? And Maria, I'd love to start with you and maybe have you reflect a little bit on the growth that NERP's seen over the last couple of years in that environment.
Yeah, it has been a crazy ride. So 2016, the Immigrant Rights Project was a $4.5–5 million organization, coming along. We have a $12 million budget now, and it's fast growth. It means that a lot of things grew really quickly because, as I was mentioning, that sort of crisis fundraising had erupted. So as every single thing hit the news, donations poured in. Many of these donors are new. We had 5,000 new donors last year and 5,000 new donors the year before. It has been, it's very much, I was like, it's not like drinking from a fire hose, it's like drinking from a waterfall and the fire hose, everything's coming. And how do you take advantage of that and use those possibilities? And it seems terrible to say take advantage of that. And I want to acknowledge that right now because the reason that this possibility exists is because people's lives are in danger. And so we are working very hard at acknowledging that fact while also trying to see what we can create out of that that sort of crisis mentality. And one of the things that I am tasked with and that I feel very strongly about is it's really about going back to basics now, having to do with retention and education of our donors. We have a lot of donors who've come in who don't know a lot about immigration. I happen to be one of those people who came in thinking she was pretty educated about immigration and then discovering that she didn't really know very much about it at all. And the people who have come to us their hearts are open, but they don't know a lot. And so how do you educate while holding on to that engagement, right? How do you not make it into a tornado or a hurricane where people give right away because they've seen the crisis, and then a year later they think it's over? Because it's not over for our clients. Are these cases that we took for these families and for during the Muslim ban, those cases are ongoing. Our cases last 3 to 5 to 12 years. So we have to, if we take the case now, we need the funding for later. So I am so committed right now to the power of engaging all those new donors and trying to bring them all in, both through education and through basic retention policies, monthly giving, monthly donor programs, these kinds of ways that we can keep people engaged, and then letting them know what their impact has been so they know their dollars are being used wisely. It's been an interesting couple of years.
Yeah, great perspective and great strategies for thinking about how you turn that into a longer-term relationship. Amanda, what are you seeing at the college? What are you hearing from donors about how the political landscape is impacting them, and what does it mean for your relationship?
Yeah, well, we hear a lot from donors about their thoughts on the political landscape for sure. And I would say, we're not in a situation where it's kind of crisis or rage giving necessarily, but we definitely have situations over the last couple of years where people are, let's say, inspired by what's happening in the political landscape to give and make a difference because they see, as I said in my opening, our students can be the solution while they're students and after they graduate in terms of some of these big, really intractable problems in our society. We had one donor who, around the election in 2016, was really concerned about issues of diversity and equity and her perception of the rise of bigotry in our country, and she gave to support our strategic equity plan. We had another donor who has advocated for immigrants through her whole life since she graduated in the 1970s, and she established a scholarship, a Dreamership scholarship for undocumented students and students for whom English was not their first language, and she has then encouraged others to give to that as well too. So we have some great examples where we're listening to our donors, we have those relationships, we're listening to the needs of our students, and then making those connections. And they're very much inspired by what's happening broadly. And so I think the key is to really think about your organization's values and your donors' values and help them understand how their giving will allow their values to be expressed and have a meaningful impact. So that's sort of some themes that are coming up in our conversation repeatedly.
Great. Stacey, at the foundation, what are you hearing from your donors?
Sure. So I would love to echo this hearts are open concept, and what we are seeing from everyone involved in the foundation, whether it's nonprofits or it's individual fund holders, families, is that their hearts are open, and their hearts are open and inspired by so many different topics right now. And I think what I would encourage nonprofit professionals, specifically fundraisers, to be thinking about is building that relationship. What is your relationship with any given donor look like, and what are the resources you can offer them? And I would encourage you to widen your aperture, if you think about photography, to not just that your donor's connection to your mission, but in any relationship that you build over time, you get to know them above and beyond your initial connection to them. So what is it within the wider nonprofit landscape that's motivating them? What is it within impact investing, if they're dabbling in that, that's motivating them? And then also, as we lead up to 2020, what inspires them politically? What's happening there? Just be really aware of your donors, those relationships, and what else is happening in their lives. And if you build that relationship, provide those resources, it's going to come back tenfold in your own giving, in your own, their support of your organization and their giving. So I would just encourage folks to really build those relationships and think of what resources you can offer donors when their heart is open to a specific cause, and what that will mean for you in the future.
I told you that we'd hear that theme of relationship. Emily, do we have any questions from the audience?
We do. This first one relates to corporate giving. Can you share a little bit more about corporate giving and what % of your total revenue comes from corporate philanthropy and sponsorship?
Great. So, I'd love to hear from each of you about how that shows up in, your revenue streams and how you think about those relationships, which, are also relationship-based. Amanda, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, corporate giving is relatively small for us because it's just been in the last couple of years that we've really dedicated more resources to encouraging that. So we've seen a sort of astronomical increase in our corporate giving to our annual fundraiser, but it's still a relatively small portion of the overall picture. I don't have the exact number off the top of my head.
Yeah, I would say the same. We have an interesting relationship with companies because we certainly have seen an increase. There has not been a lot of push towards corporate giving within NERP for a lot of various reasons, some of them political, some of them not. But I decided we could do that anyway. So we did push for it this year, and we saw a huge boost at our annual gala. So once again, I think it was a matter of nobody was asking, and so we asked more people this year, and more people gave, and giving them an entry and an opening to become involved in your organization. And then now I'm thinking of how do I deepen those relationships that we just started this year. So it's always about deepening relationships with human beings, right? So back at it.
And I would say at the Community Foundation, we have a slightly unique perspective into corporate giving. It's not the same type of giving that the two of you were mentioning. We get to work with individuals and families once their business becomes incredibly successful and or they're selling their business or it's changing generations. And so it's back to those relationships and back to individuals and the change they want to see in the world, often fueled by corporate dollars, is how we see that piece.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a great perspective. And of course, what we saw in the data overall, foundation giving saw the largest growth in terms of sources of giving, but corporate giving also went up. So, interesting to see how corporate profits and the policy environment related to companies, which is going to vary by sector, of course, how that influences their giving and their thinking about philanthropy.
Thank you. Our next question is about equity and philanthropy in the Pacific Northwest. Can you share a little bit more about that, both from the foundation and donor side, and specifically, what are you doing to raise the conversation with donors?
Okay, so great question, digging back in around questions of equity. So I love that. What are you doing to raise this conversation with donors? And Stacey, maybe we can start with you. And
happy to.
Yeah.
one of the main things we're doing at the Greater Tacoma Community Foundation is being really thoughtful and intentional around language, and the word donors is actually one we're pulling away from, and we haven't found the best substitute, quite frankly. So we talk a lot about community members, that we are here to support all of Pierce County, and that we need, our offices are downtown. We need to get out of downtown in downtown Tacoma. We need to get out into the community, and we just need to be talking with and listening to individuals, nonprofits, kind of everyone in the community, and hearing what they want our community to look like, and making sure we're reflecting that back to them. So again, language, we don't have all the solutions, and we're still working through it.
Yeah, so we have put racial equity into our strategic plan for this year. And I know strategic plans, there's lots of jokes about them, but as a development person, I find them very useful. And we share that strategic plan with our donors. And so it is front and center as to one of the things that we are putting our dollars behind. We have been doing some surveys just internally, and one of the big conversations is, do we actually survey our donors about racial equity? What if we included donors in that conversation from the get-go? We survey our staff, and we talk about who will be serving in our community. Well, what if we turn the lens to donors and said, and what about you? How are you part of this conversation? Because they are. We, too, have been sort of sliding away from the term donors. Supporters, community members, these are all really saying our donors are part of our community. And then I think the targeted outreach to individuals within those communities who can connect you to even more individuals. I think there's been a lot of, we'll say that we believe in racial equity, and we'll make sure that hopefully people just come to us knowing that we now all believe everyone is equal, and that is very nice, but it is not very effective. And so being effective means specifically reaching out there and saying, hello, donors. Hello, person who may have some means. How would you like to support this organization that is doing so much good within our community as a member of the community that we're serving? So.
Can I add one point to that?
Sure.
I would also love to say, as we're talking about language and we're talking about what we're looking at, the other thing is to really look at all of the ways in which people are philanthropists. Right? Even that word could have had some baggage around it, but to be a philanthropist means the love of humankind, to love your neighbors, to love your community. So we saw that individual or giving kind of over time was maybe decreasing, but what about volunteerism? A lot of the reports are saying that people are getting out there and they're doing the work themselves. They're volunteering, they're showing up at your organization, they're showing up at your education events, and really looking at that and how do we reflect that philanthropy in our impact reports or our year-end reports. What does that look like? Because that engagement is what's going to lead to the giving and the increased giving. So I would just really have all of us open up our view of what philanthropy is and can be.
Yeah, it's a great point, and I know the research has shown that folks who volunteer are much more likely, significantly more likely, to be donors as well. So how are we building those broader relationships and doing that with an equity mindset? Amanda, is there anything else you would add?
I don't want to repeat what I shared before, but I will underscore something that I talked about a little bit and then I think came up in your remarks respectively as well too, and that's about learning and education, right? So I think that, one of the things that I have observed is there is a lot of learning that many people need to do around these concepts and these topics. And so how do you help your donors learn in a way that then, is, I love your metaphor, open the aperture, so that they can see why equity and inclusion is relevant to your work as an organization, their giving, the larger picture, right? So I think we need to really lean into that, and that can be challenging.
Yeah, that's interesting. And, I think reflecting on the fact that Stacey and Maria, you both mentioned moving away necessarily from the term donor and kind of some of that language. And I know one of the conversations that's really been grounded here in the Northwest and I think is emanating elsewhere now is around community-centered fundraising. And, that concept, bringing that more and more into our work as fundraisers, as folks in the nonprofit sector. And so, I think that's a really important thing to be thinking about and to be bringing into conversations with donors, with community, with the relationships that we're building with the folks who support our work. I think we have time for one more question.
Yes, we do. For a small nonprofit that doesn't yet have a lot of resources to build out a robust digital media strategy or event-based fundraising strategy, where would you say is the best place to focus our attention given all of the current trends?
That's a fantastic question, and certainly something to be thinking about as a small nonprofit. Where do you best put your energy and your efforts, given that you're probably wearing a lot of hats sitting in that development shop? Maria, you spoke a little bit about the Facebook success that NERP has had, so can we start with you?
Yeah, and I've worked in small nonprofits, so I know what it's like to be the only development person and like, what am I going to do today? I think you have to know what your donor is excited about. So I'm on a board of another organization called Team Child, which is smaller than the one I work for, and we just did our first luncheon event this year. And everyone was very, very scared about it, but we have been hearing from our donors and from our board members and from other people, like, we want to have an event where we can bring all of our friends and they can learn about it. So we did it, and everyone was scared, and we made money. We made a lot of money, and we were all very surprised, and it was all very exciting. So, but we did that because we'd listened to what our donors said that they wanted to have from us. Now, if you're getting a lot of media impact, or if you have the kind of subject matter in your organization that lends itself to social media as a presence, then that might be the route you go. I think it really does depend on who are your donors, how are they interacting with you, and what possibilities do you have within the realm of what you do. That's why it's hard sometimes with these webinars, because we're all doing really different work. But some stuff really lends itself to social media, especially, like I said, if the political climate warrants it, maybe that's where you focus. So I think knowing who you're talking to is always the first step to knowing which direction to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just weigh in briefly on that. So you joked a little bit about strategy before, and anyone who knows me, I'm big on strategy. Yes. And I think, build a thoughtful strategy, try things, and evaluate them. That's the other thing. And don't feel like because you've committed to one thing, right? One, an event series or a lot of events or a certain kind of digital media strategy, that's what you need to do forever. Just work in systems of evaluation so you can understand, am I reaching the people we need to reach through this event, or am I just putting a lot of resource into it and we're not really reaping we're not meeting the goals that we've set for that. So try things, don't be afraid to fail, but evaluate and then make different choices the next time around.
And send the copy of that Don't Be Afraid to Fail to your executive directors. I understand that sometimes you have to try stuff, and sometimes it's not always going to work.
Yeah. Tell your ED that Amanda
said
it's okay.
They can call me.
Stacey, anything you would add on this?
So I would just echo in that kind of trying things and the data and the reflecting is to balance both data. Look at the data, look at the trends that appear in data, ask somebody else to look at your data and see what they see, and listen to anecdotes. And you've got to have that balance because both are valuable and both are true, but keep them balanced because either or can just sway you in a dangerous direction.
Great. We've got just a couple of minutes left, so I'd love to hear from each of you, what's one piece of advice that you have for fundraisers? What should they be focusing on in the months ahead as they think about a positive 2019? Stacey, let's start with you.
I would focus on generosity. I would focus on these numbers. It's still the second highest year of giving in history. So focus on generosity, build your relationships with donors, and show them impact.
Maria?
Yeah, I'm going to reiterate the showing them impact. We sent a letter out to all of our donors, both through email and through paper, just a 2-page letter saying, here's what we did in the last year and a half because of you. And we had people who called us and wrote emails back. They engaged just to say, thank you for letting us know, which just underscored to me that a lot of them aren't hearing that from other organizations. So tell your donors what you're doing. They don't just know because you send out the e-newsletter. They don't always read it. Do something a little special and let them know that you appreciate and are doing things with their dollars, that they want to see their impact. So celebrate it, right?
Great advice.
Great. So I'll carry on the themes of relationships and impact and generosity and values as well too. I mentioned values a few times. So, I'll close with a quick story. So about a little over a week ago, we celebrated graduation with 1,000 students and their families, and I had the joy that morning of introducing a donor to a student. he had supported. And that student was graduating that day without any student loan debt because of his generosity. Single mom, come back to school in her 30s, and she talked, so I introduced them. Again, this is showing the impact. She talks about her commitment to reducing homelessness, actually, in Pierce County. And her words were so moving. And he was incredibly moved as well, too, the donor. And he said, with tears in his eyes, you know, you don't get it. This is an honor for me. Mm-hmm. And so when we really connect our donors' values to the people we serve and help them see that impact, you'll have positive results. You really will. If you do this work with heart and with rigor, it can be amazing.
So true, and it's a beautiful story to end us on. Thank you all for joining us today for our Northwest perspective on the Giving USA data. If you're interested in digging deeper into the data, please visit givingusa.org, and you can use the code Campbell to get 30% off on the Giving USA report. Please also check out our upcoming and our past webinar offerings at campbellcompany.com. And I'd like to take another moment to just really thank our panelists today for bringing your expertise and your really great perspectives and insights into our conversation today. Stacey Guanella from the Greater Tacoma Community Foundation, Maria Colby Wolfe from the Northwest Immigrants' Rights Project, and Amanda Walker from the Evergreen State College Foundation. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.